You should buy a coffee grinder, and the simple reason why is oxygen. Let me explain. You see, inside of every coffee bean is carbon dioxide created through the roasting process. And this carbon dioxide both protects and preserves all of the naturally occurring flavor compounds that were also created through that same roasting process. But oxygen destroys and denatures flavor compounds so that you can't taste and enjoy them anymore. When you leave a coffee bean whole, it limits how much carbon dioxide can leave and how rapidly it can leave, as well as it limits the surface area that oxygen has access to in destroying flavor compounds. But when you grind coffee, you greatly increase that surface area, losing far more carbon dioxide far more rapidly and giving exponentially more access for oxygen to take the flavor out of your coffee. And you can actually see carbon dioxide leaving coffee during a blooming phase, especially during a pour over. All of that foam that's being created, that's carbon dioxide leaving the beans. When this is only for a short period of time, such as right before you brew, well, nothing bad's going to happen. But when it sits in a can for day after day, week after week, month after month, you kind of end up with a very stale, bad tasting product. This is also the reason why coffee bags commonly feature a small little circle, which is a one-way valve, preventing oxygen from entering but allowing excess carbon dioxide to leave, both purging any oxygen that was in the bag at the time it was sealed, as well as preventing the bag from, exploding. The 3 essentials for grinding coffee. You need fresh coffee beans, you need some sort of a grinder, and some way to measure it. The big thing that people don't realize when you're first getting into making really good coffee at home is that all of these brewers can use the same kind of coffee, but they can't use the same size of ground coffee. And that distinction there is a world of difference. You can take this bag of dark roast and you can make a French press with it, you can make a pour over with it, you can make an AeroPress, you can make espresso, you can make any kind of coffee you want with coffee beans like this. But what you can't do is grind it to the same size and expect to get good results out of all of those different brewers. They're all different in how they operate, how they extract the flavor out of the beans. If you want a good tasting cup, you need to grind to different sizes for different brewers. This is one of the most fundamental rules about brewing good coffee, and if you ignore it, well, your coffee might be good, but it won't be good all the time across all different types of brewers. It actually matters a lot how coarsely or how finely you grind your coffee depending upon your brew method. So let's consider the French press. It uses a coarsely ground coffee with a very long 4 to 5 minute brew time. This works because it takes that long to extract the flavors you want out of a coarsely ground coffee. If you use a finely ground coffee with the same brew time, you will extract too much material from the coffee grounds, resulting in a bitter and astringent over-extracted cup of coffee. If you use a finely ground coffee and a short brew time, you will get your extraction right, but the metal filter that's inherent in this design probably won't remove enough of those fine particles out of your final cup. But compare that to a pour-over. This uses a paper filter, a more finely ground coffee, and a much shorter 2.5 to 3 minute brew time. If you get your grind size right, the fine particles will help to slow down the flow of water through that bed of coffee, ensuring that you get the right brew time for a proper extraction. If you grind too finely, it will clog the filter too much and take too long, especially for that reduced grind size, resulting in over extraction. And there are lots of variations on these basic designs and many others as well, requiring a whole spectrum of different grind sizes. What you should do after you've brewed your coffee is taste it, but ask yourself, if you don't like it, is it too sour or is it too bitter? If it was too sour, you likely also had a short brew time, maybe even under 2 minutes. If it was too bitter, you probably had too long of a brew time, maybe even beyond 3.5 minutes. So what you do in this situation is you adjust your grind size, because your grind size in this case actually helps to control how fast the water flows through that coffee. And when you grind a little bit more coarsely, it will flow faster, reducing your brew time. If you grind a little bit more finely, it will slow down the flow of water and increase your brew time. But it's not just the time that you're changing. The more finely you grind the coffee, the less time it takes to actually extract that flavor. So a perfect example of this would be a French press compared to espresso. Those are on opposite ends of the spectrum in grind size. A French press uses a huge coarse grind size, and an espresso uses one of the finest grind settings out there. And when you compare the brew time, 4 to 5 minutes for a French press versus 20 to 30 seconds for espresso, you can see that there's a direct correlation between how finely or how coarsely you grind your coffee and how long your brew time should be. In the case of the French press, because you have such a long brew time, your grind size can be very forgiving. But in the case of espresso, it is brutally demanding. You have to get your grind size exactly right, or it's not going to taste very good. This is why any kind of coffee maker that uses that percolation style, meaning the water pours through the coffee, is so frustrating to get right. Because anytime you taste your coffee and you say, oh, it's too sour, let me grind more finely, you can end up exponentially changing your extraction, because when you grind more finely, you also are increasing the brew time, because anytime you reduce that particle size, you're shortening the necessary brew time, and you're also lengthening the actual brew time by slowing down the flow of water through that coffee. So we end up with a very basic principle. If your coffee is too sour, grind more finely. If your coffee is too bitter, or definitely if it's getting into being astringent, grind more coarsely.